All right, welcome to Three Blondes, One Battle. I have a guest today. I'm super excited to introduce her and talk about the topic at hand. Her name is Allaire, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am curious, how did you even find Three Blondes, One Battle?
Um, I, I was looking up MS stuff and I found you guys on a podcast, and
Okay.
this was MS month, and my husband has MS
Uh-huh.
and I have some MS information. And so I thought, seems like we might have some common goals.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, absolutely. Well, I want to preface it before we even talk today that we are both not medical professionals. I know everybody listening to my voice, you know that I am not a medical professional, but neither is Alaire. But she does have some background in medical lab science, and I'll let you talk about that. The fact that you've co-wrote some papers, published papers, is very impressive. And I do think that this is something that we talked about a couple years back on the podcast when the paper came out. I know that Matt Embry talks about it a little bit on Facebook and Instagram, but we really haven't kind of talked in depth about Epstein-Barr virus. And so, yeah, I'll give you the stage. Let's just tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, and kind of why this is interesting to you.
my name is Allaire Schneider. My husband, we've been married 22 years. He's had MS for 20. And, it started out RMS and now he is progressive. That has definitely been a journey. We live in Michigan. We have two children that are, one is in college and one is about to be in the future here, and we're very proud of them. Very intelligent young people, proud of them. Like I said, how we really got to you is MS, right? And in my medical lab science classes, that's like every ology out there. I mean, it's not just biochemistry and genetics, but like 5 classes of microbiology and virology and immunology and microbiology and biochemistry. Body chemistry as well, and hematology, coagulation, blood bank, all of that. I mean, it's a high science degree, and so basically they're the people in the background in the hospital you don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So they're kind of like the nurses are your right hand, your lab staff are your left hand,
Mm-hmm.
and 70% of the information your doctors are looking at when they go into their computer system is to look at the findings and results of the lab,
Yep.
and they use that to treat their patients. And a lot of times there's a lot of everyone sees the nurse, everyone sees, and they do deserve, something. But I went from being in the hospital to doing some other lab work because the place I was at, they were, 4 days off a month. And it just, the hours are crazy, and you have to go in all these different departments, and you have to be able to do all of the equipment and QCing and calibration and troubleshooting. And it's a lot, and it's very stressful for not very good pay, and the hours are terrible. So there's obviously a shortage for that reason. But when I was going through my classwork, I also took a research class and wrote a paper because I have Crohn's. And it was in regards to Crohn's and specifically Remicade and curcumin. And you can look me up. It's pollen research. It's been cited many times.
Yeah.
And what my hypothesis was is that Remicade reduces TNF-alpha, which is an anti-inflammatory marker, right? So a lot of autoimmune diseases, that is one of them. MS is another one. They have a lot of inflammatory response. And so they're trying to reduce that to reduce disease process. When a different inflammatory marker goes up, IL-1, that indicates that the medication is losing effectiveness, right? And curcumin, and there's a great paper by Dr. Gupta, and it went over at least 12, if not 15 different mechanisms of action of how it reduces inflammation, is actually good for your liver and actually reduces your cancer markers, IL-1, TNF-alpha, and a bunch of others.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you had mild disease, could this on its own help you? If it is more severe, if you were taking Remicade and you need that to continue working, could taking them together have additional benefits along with allowing your medication to work longer for you?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's cheap over the counter and it's way effective. And this is way back, I think in 2017 or 18. And it's gotten a lot of citations from other places. But I bring it up, because, first, that gives me a little bit more merit. And when I'm talking about things, I do know a little more about, the science realm. And secondly, again, autoimmune diseases, there's a decent chunk of overlap to them, and inflammation being one of them, and stress being another one of them. Right. And that affects your immune system. And so that's how I really got into, looking at, my daughter had RLS, and helping to find, I think there was a malabsorption problem, metabolism problem, and led to a cell level deficiency. And after 4 years, we were able to find something, and it was a very highly absorbable vitamin. I had to go look into nutrition and understand calcium oxalate is crap. Wow. And the calcium citrate is what you want. And when they're saying it's 100% of what you need, well, if you could absorb it, that's true. But when you're only absorbing 15% of it, that's not true. And then I found links of how, some of the pharmaceuticals own some of the nutritions. And so which do you make the money off, people making, getting sick or not. So anyways, but we ended up found something for her. And in less than a week, the RLS that was actually giving her hypoglycemia in the morning, she was that bad. And she was only like 5, just after 5. Wow. It was gone.
And what is RLS?
Restless leg syndrome.
Oh, okay.
And so the hypothesis I had was, and this is way back, like 2008, was that when you were resting, and I remember going to nursing classes, and that's when you could take kids to nursing class. And I was real little, and I would be drawing and taking notes. And I remember the teacher saying, the best way to increase circulation is extremity movement. Okay. So, your leg movement, your arm movement, that is a good way to increase the circulation, your conveyor belt, like Lucy Bell with the chocolates, right? Okay. What if you are deficient in something? And we know with oxygen, that's the case. Like your heart will pump more, right? To get that oxygen going. And that's why you end up having heart problems. Well, what if you were deficient in a nutrient and you were always deficient in it, but when you're resting, you're even more deficient? And extremity movement is the best way to increase that. And that was my hypothesis. And so then I was looking at, it causes MS and you have an increased risk for MS, RA, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depending on the researcher you're reading. And so that to me meant there was different deficiencies then, right? If you don't have enough bricks, you can't rebuild the brick house as it's being deteriorated. If you don't have enough wood, you know what I mean? Like, and so with MS, you have myelin and you have B12. And that's some of the things you need. And so when you're doing a differential diagnosis for MS, one of the things they will look at is there isn't a quote unquote, so far, test for MS, right?
Right.
So what they do is they rule out these other problems. And so let's say if you don't have enough intrinsic factors in your stomach, well, then you can't actually absorb the B12 into your body. And that is one of the requirements for myelin to be built, kind of like building a house. You can't make chocolate chip cookies without the chocolate chips. And so, but if you give someone a shot of B12, you've now bypassed that absorption metabolism problem, and people can get that B12, and that's the fix for some people, right? And for other people, they might have lupus, which is actually can be your brain, your liver, all these other issues, and that is something that when sunlight hits your skin, there's a chemical reaction, and that's why they actually will have this red marking on their face, like a wolf or lupus. That's what it's named after, and it's sunlight, not heat, that will make that worse. And you can do what's called an ANA test. And what that is, it fluoresces bright green if you're positive for lupus. Okay. And if it doesn't, you rule that out. Do you have Guillain-Barré? Do you have, right? And so then you come to, okay, well, everything else is ruled out. It's probably MS. But what is not on there is what we were going to talk about today. When you do a differential diagnosis, and now that they have this information, they are not yet putting this on, let's say, an annual physical to rule this out with what is going wrong with you with MS, is looking at Epstein-Barr virus, which is something I actually had done with my husband. I think it was when I was in school, because I was going through my immunology class and my virology class, and I was learning about these different antibodies that you produce. And the first one you produce is kind of like a paramedic. It comes up, goes down really quick. Within a day or two, it's gone. And then the next antibody is what, it's kind of like the paramedic handing you off to the doctors and nurses. Well, then you're sick for a while and you have to get better, and it's kind of plateaued. And then all of a sudden, you find the exact antibody that works, right, to get rid of something. It's shaped right. It's kind of like putting a 3-prong plug in a 2-prong hole. It doesn't work, right? You got to find the right one. And once you do, copies it all off, and then you can get rid of it. And then that antibody goes away. And then you have what's called a memory antibody. Okay. It's basically a self-vaccination cell. One of the good guys that you need to get rid of that, you just keep a few of those around. And if you ever encountered it again, then you just replicate that out. That's why you never have the same cold twice. Okay. So my hypothesis was that with this, maybe for some people with, you know, an autoimmune disease, maybe they're not clearing it. So the assumption is made like this. If you see that antibody, that memory cell in Epstein-Barr that's called EBNA, that you have cleared that virus. And that means that antibody that's out there for that long extended period of time, that's gone because you've cleared it. That's the assumption. Right. You have to make assumptions. You do. Like, what's the 95% rule? Okay. But if you have an autoimmune disease, you're already the zebra.
Right.
So why not look at that?
Correct.
And some of the other things too, because I remember when he got diagnosed and I was talking to one of my relatives about this, and Epstein-Barr got brought up at that point. And I said, here's the only thing I don't get with Epstein-Barr. If it really was a virus, it's contagious. And why wouldn't all the spouses and children have MS? Right. And that's why I was like, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But then there's a few other things that happened along our journey. And one of them was one of his blood works came back high with ferritin. Ferritin is a stored version of iron. Okay. Anything in your body you want to balance. You don't want too much. You don't want too little. Okay. Causes problems. So with ferritin, what it is actually extremely a common genetic disorder of your GI. And you can't release iron. Okay. Now it's not an on-off switch, right? It's graded. So for some people, they can get rid of 10%, right? And some people can get rid of 90%. Okay. And so he had a high ferritin score. And we were going through a move and all this other stuff. And it's like a year and a half later, I was like, I wanted to get back to that. And I asked the doctor, could you test for ferritin? Because I want to make sure that was a little too high. And he, after some finagling with him and asking, he did do the ferritin test. And it came back, the high for that test is 300, okay, or at our area. And his came back just shy of 1,200. Wow. And the doctor said, oh, see, it's just a little high, no problem. And I said, and I'm saying this for a reason here too. By the way, I like our general practitioner. We still have this guy. He's a nice guy, okay? I told him, I said, you are good and you're a nice person and you've always treated us right. I do not expect you to be God. I do not expect you to know what you don't know. What I expect is this. This is obviously an abnormal problem. There is a problem. Neither of us know what it is. Be the hero. Don't put it underneath the rug and refer him to someone else who's a specialist. And he did the right thing and referred us, and he has hemochromatosis. He got a diagnosis. Now, it's a really easy fix. On your blood, you think of it as like a big rig, okay? And it has something called hemoglobin. And think of that as like, the trailer, okay, that hauls stuff. And what that does is your hemoglobin, which is full of iron, takes oxygen to your cells, okay? So if you get your blood taken every 2 months, that reduces the hemoglobin, which has the iron, which gets rid of, that gets rid of it for you. Okay. So you're not getting rid of it through your GI. But the reason you don't want it too high is it can do damage to your brain and to your liver. Okay. Why am I bringing all this up with MS? Because viruses require iron to replicate. It feeds the viruses, which in this case are the bad guys. And actually, when you're sick, your liver will try to what's called sequester the iron. So it will try to starve out the bad guys. Okay. Obviously, but if you're always in a high iron state, you're in a viral happy state. And I think a lot of people with MS and autoimmune disease in general, they're type A personalities, they are stressed, and that depresses your immune system. So there again, you're in this depressed state. And I think it goes to why maybe some people have MS and why we're bringing up the Epstein-Barr virus was because, while I had my husband tested for Epstein-Barr while I was in school, I think it was around 2018, and he was positive for both. And I think it was 2023, they came out with Epstein-Barr being, quote unquote, the leading cause of MS.
They sure did. Yeah.
Not the only, but one. So my thing is, what we did at that point was, and understand, when I did this was a hypothesis on my own. I didn't have a research paper.
Which most of it is. That's what we talk about on our podcast. Most of this is you doing it on your own. So yeah, go ahead.
So I talked to the doctors and we did try an antiviral, and it was a big schmoll. I'm like, here's the thing. Let's say he didn't have MS, but he's still testing positive for this, which he shouldn't. Antivirals are cheap and they're low toxic.
Yep.
Right. And why wouldn't you treat him for a viral? And so they did on that premise. Now, what I found out is that, Epstein-Barr is kind of like a cold sore. Okay. It likes nerve tissue too. And a lot of times you're not getting a new virus when you have a cold sore. It stays latent. It's
Right.
on your nerves, and when
Mhm.
you are stressed, it comes out. Okay. Some people with Epstein-Barr, and what they found now is that some may not have the right targets on those cells for your immune system to know it's the bad guy to attack it and get rid of it.
Mm.
Okay. And it's a kind of a sneaky virus. Okay. It's also weird. That virus is weird in the fact that usually it is the virus itself that does damage. And with this particular one, it's the antibody that does damage to your
Mm.
system. Okay. So we did this one antiviral, and we come to find out it's not really, I mean, it can be helpful for some people, but it doesn't clear Epstein-Barr all the time. And
What did you try?
Cyclopor.
Okay.
I apologize. I read things. I don't always enunciate them. So if I'm
Oh,
enunciating a little bit wrong, the VIRs, the VIRs at the end, those
uh-huh.
are always the antivirals. If you see MOB, that's a monoclonal antibody in your drugs and stuff. But anyway, so we did that, but it wasn't very effective. And then I found this latest research that was showing sometimes a drug is created and you find out later that it actually has a different use within the body.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so there was some European research on how it was a completely different drug. We used it for a couple decades, very safe, very low cost, definitely compared to the DMDs. And we had him try that. The issue is about a year and a half ago, he was on Reba for 14 years. He came off that. He went into a clinical trial after that. That didn't work. And then he went into, he was on Kesimpta for a year.
Okay.
And I think he had, it's rare, but they happen, is that with these, some of these drugs, you can actually have another autoimmune disease, right? Like Remicade can cause lupus and stuff. Mm-hmm. He went downhill more in that 1 year than he had the previous 5 or 6 combined. And we ended up finding that he might have psoriasis on his ear and stuff. And so, but he came off from that. And so he started leveling out. But one of the issues that went really downhill in that time is bowel function. And this drug can cause constipation. So he had to come off that. We couldn't continue trying it. So we are trying with our doctor to see if we can't use a couple of these other meds along with, there's some diet things and there's some, herbs and different things that you can do combined. And I'm a big proponent of that.
Yeah.
Use everything in your arsenal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you use Dr. Schultz's products? He's like the king of poop. Dr. Schultz has the best.
There's that, I think it's called BioComplete, the probiotics that have the bacteria that actually are spores, right, on the outside of them. We use that, and I know some other people use that and had some really good results. It's interesting, some of the things you come across. I know way back in the day, and this was over 10 years ago, I'd heard about, for Crohn's. Mm-hmm. So disgusting, but taking...
We like disgusting.
pork, hookworm eggs.
Oh, whoa.
And you snack it back. Now, here's the thing. Certain parasites have, just like right, the nerve tissue.
Yeah.
Okay? So when you have a cold sore, that particular virus loves the nerve. Okay. It's not just nerve tissue. It's nerve tissue in a human, right? Just some things. When you get swimmer's itch, it's actually came out of a snail and it's trying to find a duck. And if it hits your leg first, that's what swimmer's itch is. It's actually a parasite. Wow. And it can't live in your tissue. So it eventually dies. And then you have that itch. Well, with pork hookworms, they live in pork, not us. And the hypothesis, and I'm seeing this come out now actually like in the public, is that your immune system is then attacking the hookworm eggs, which will die over the process of a few months. Okay. And it's not attacking you.
So are you still doing that?
I did not do that.
Oh, you didn't?
I had read, and I was like, that makes sense.
You read it 10 years ago, and now it's coming out in the light. Isn't that?
And I actually asked because I was in a microbiology class, and again, this is at least, I don't know, 8 years ago, something like that. And I asked, I was so excited about microbiology. I was like, so we're going to learn about good gut bacteria and what can help us, right? And he's like, we're going to talk about like malaria and E. coli and salmonella and Shigella, but we're not going to, he's like, no, we don't talk about the good bacteria.
Right.
And I was so dejected. And I said, well, if we're looking at these, the pathology, right? And then I brought up the hookworms, and he kind of made sure no one's looking around. He's like, yeah, I have heard people doing that, and it being effective. So, but it's definitely something on the down low, right?
Yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
based on the fact that they only go after certain tissue, and for them,
Right.
that's pork.
Right.
And again, I'm not a doctor, medical lab scientist, but I'm not a doctor. And even if I was a doctor, you don't give medical advice. You have to go to your doctor,
Yeah.
decide, right? And I'm talking about
It's
iron.
really not medical advice. What we're talking about is trying things. If you read something, if you like you told yourself 7 years ago, 8 years ago, this makes sense, and you didn't try it, and now 8 years goes by. It's kind of like vitamin D. Remember when they came out and when they're like, oh, you need 10,000 IUs of vitamin D, and I was like 10 years after I was already doing it. I was like, duh, I've already been doing it for 10 years.
Oh no, seriously, I did D. We were on D. What was that? My son. I was full pregnant with son, so it must have been 2005. And I went to the neurologist and I said, vitamin D, and he said, and I was full pregnant. I mean, full pregnant. And he said, I know you're trying to be a good little wifey. He couldn't have been more patronizing. Oh my
Right.
God. And so I just took the PubMed research and I slid it
Yeah.
across the desk and I said,
Yeah.
well, maybe you might want to look at this PubMed research.
How
And then
funny. That's exactly around the time that I started doing that because I was
yeah, and so
diagnosed. That's so funny. I printed it out too.
have
That's
you ever
hilarious.
been on Daily Strength?
No.
Okay, never mind. I won't say
Oh, I'm
anything.
going
I've
to.
been I've been put on. I was on it for a few years and then I came off, but I was a huge proponent and I would put all the research out
Wow.
about that kind of stuff with
Did
vitamin
you get in
D.
trouble? Did you have to stop?
No, like I had research and stuff, and I said, this is, and I always had like B12, right, in the research, and I was a big proponent of having the PubMed research. But the hookworms thing, I mean, there's the gross component, but there's also being able to get it, right? You
Right.
can get
That's
vitamin D online. The hookworms,
mhm.
who the heck did get hookworms? Like, I
Yeah.
mean,
It's
so
very hard in America. I mean, it's like when I did fecal transplant, that's not legal. I had to find somebody that had a proper donor that used to be a doctor that would do it to me. Like you have to look for these things because America will not provide the information for you.
well, and here's the thing with that. I really get why you want to go to a doctor, have them test it for STDs, for viruses, right, and parasites, and then be able to use that, which is what we should be doing. C. diff, even you understand they double glove when they're in hospitals. They disinfect, they use the bacteria, the bleach. I mean, double bleach.
Mhm.
Anything that goes in that room doesn't come out. So like
Mhm.
all the kitchen stuff is disposable. Nothing goes
Yeah.
back into the kitchen.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
and yet after that, patients who go in those rooms are still 2% more likely to get C. diff than other patients. Okay. Like it's a huge thing. And a lot of these patients, nothing helps them except for the fecal matter transplant.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so if we know that, and I talked to a doctor actually specifically for that because I wanted to go
Oh,
through and do that.
interesting. Okay.
He was an infectious disease doctor in Detroit. And he said, I would love to do that. I absolutely agree with you. The research is there. He said, but in this country, unless you have C. diff, do you have C. diff? And I can do it. And if
Yeah.
it's not, then I cannot do it. So
Yep.
you are left to find someone you trust,
Yep.
that
Yeah.
you know their background,
Yep, that
and
they're actually testing the donor, that you know everything about the donor. Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal finding somebody that will actually do it for you.
well, I mean, I couldn't find a doctor to do it for me.
Mhm.
And when you're bleeding and you can't eat and you can't everything else, um, when you have broth for six weeks because you
Ooh,
can't eat, right?
yeah.
And in the bleeding is it's so I will be I guess I'll be frank with this. I am not advocating someone else to do this, but like when you cannot eat and you are bleeding and you're in pain
Yeah.
and nothing else is working, I had a really good friend and I know her background and I did it myself. And
Mhm.
I was been bleeding for quite some time and I took care of it Friday and then I did it on Saturday. At that point there was no more blood, period.
Wow.
And
Did
by
you at least
Sunday,
have some help? I see women that do like there's online groups that like are do it yourself, and I don't know how you can do it by yourself. Did you do it by yourself in the bathtub?
no, what I did was is I did coffee enemas.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And which is really good. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can hold it for 3 or 5 minutes, then it actually is
So hard.
very cleansing for your liver.
That's the hardest part.
It is, but it helps your liver, right?
Right.
And my thought process was that there is, some kind of bad bacteria or virus, something going on and I'm not saying stress isn't a part of it. I'm not saying I think it's a pie of
Oh, absolutely.
issues. Okay.
Fine.
My
Yeah.
grandmother had ulcerative colitis, so there's probably genetic also component to
Yep.
it. Definitely stress component to it. But, you know, if you could cleanse your GI, right? So if there's something bad in there, what you're doing is you're rinsing it out.
Yep.
So you're having less of a reaction to it.
Yep.
It's not hurtful to you. The old nursing magazines the journals, they would teach nurses with had coffee enemas in them.
Yeah.
They used to. So had been doing that. So I did that. And then, you have a sterile cup and you take what you need and you have sterile water and a sterile spoon that's plastic that you throw out, and you mix it really, 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 really well. And you add that to water and I did what I had to do. But I obviously am not advocating. I honestly, what I would advocate for is that we actually have a government where you can have facilities where you go through the proper mechanism of, here's somebody who, I know is very healthy, who is not sexually active.
Yeah, but you really think that's going to happen in America? I'm sorry.
I know, but when we're talking to these other people, right, and they're listening, I would so rather we do it where it is proceduralized and correct.
Absolutely.
But when you are bleeding and pain and you can't eat,
you do it. You do what you have to do. Yeah, absolutely. So Epstein-Barr. So back to Epstein-Barr. So what's so funny is when I do talk publicly about MS, and I have for almost my whole journey. And so I ask people, and some people won't tell me, and some people are fine with telling me, do you have herpes virus? Do you have Epstein-Barr? That's something I've been asking for 20 years. Every single person that will answer that question honestly to me, and they're like, I mean, just don't tell anybody, but yeah, I was diagnosed with HSV, or I have Epstein. They all have MS, all of them. So that is just one American, one person in little old North Carolina that, asked a handful of people that I know personally. Every single one of us have been diagnosed with Epstein-Barr virus or herpes once in the past. So it's just interesting. I think Epstein-Barr virus was kind of brought to the light, especially if you're in the fitness and nutrition world. I know that Chalene Johnson talked about it for, oh my gosh, like a year on her podcast, like going through what she was doing for Epstein-Barr, what it was causing, how she was feeling, that she would do lives, like showing what she felt like, and then going to what she did for it. So going to what you have researched about Epstein-Barr, if you do have an actual way that you can go and provide this information to your provider and ask, hey, I'm just kind of curious. Can you maybe test me for, and just say it like kind of, you're not being
aggressive. I would like to rule out this being a positive.
Yeah.
That's exactly. And do it to your general practitioner. Go to your general practitioner and say, due to this research saying, EBV is the leading cause of MS. I would like to rule this out. And again, general practitioners are the ones that would take care of virus. And more likely maybe would to do the testing. But here's my thing is, you can ask people, and then science is considered anecdotal. Okay, it's not necessarily that it's wrong, but what has more merit is when you go get testing.
Right.
And, maybe they come back if you do this testing and it's negative. You have peace of mind. Maybe that's not your issue. I bring up a few other things, like a couple parasites and some other things that you may want to rule out as well. But if it comes back positive, something that we could not get because it took everything I could just to get the initial testing, and then actually try something later, is if it's positive, you can do a quantitative test. Okay. And quantity, the N, right? That's the number. So you want a baseline number. Okay, so it's not just about how you're feeling, and I'm not saying that that's not valid, but having an actual number, right? And let's say that number is 100. I'm just going to throw out a number.
Sure.
And then let's say 3 to 6 months later, you want to get retested after you've done X, Y, or Z through your doctor, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Okay, you come back, if that number is still around 100, whatever you did wasn't effective.
Right.
Okay, but if that number is 50, we're on the right route, but we're still not down to 0.
Right.
Okay? And you can keep going on that path. And so I really suggest doing a quantitative test afterwards, and finding out what helps you, because that might be a very individual thing. And, another good thing maybe is get a ferritin test, or, if your ferritin is really high, that can be hemochromatosis. And here's just a general thing I always put on the papers that I've, written on the website is I do come from a medical lab science background, and I'm going to tell you something that a lot of doctors don't know. Okay. And that is that the numbers that your lab gives you, they are accurate, but they are not based on a healthy subset of the population. They are not a standard of care. They do change over time and location. It is based on 95% of the people that are in your area. And if those people are sicker, that is a sick range, not a healthy range.
Wow. Nobody says that. Nobody talks about that.
Nobody. Wow. Okay. And so when you're looking at vitamin D, and I have something on my LinkedIn profile, you can go look at it for free. I put it out many years ago. And it has all the charts from the PubMed research and the citations at the bottom. And you could print that off and take that to your doctor if you wanted to. But what it went over is how, and the charts and everything, MS, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, or SLE, it has all the charts showing that if you wanted to reduce your risk for breast cancer in half, having a vitamin D level of 52 or higher. Okay. And at that level, you reduce colon cancer by 50%, MS by 60%, and RA by 38%. Okay. And if you already have these diseases, it reduces disease activity, which obviously you know this. Okay. But in Michigan, you'd have to be in the top 5% of the population to get that.
Oh, I'm sure. Absolutely. Even Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all of those northern states.
And they have higher MS rates, right?
Higher
and I think this has been known for a while, but I also put in there too, and I have this. So if you do this MS paper that I have on here, okay, I actually have a small jig on there about vitamin D. But a big deal is taking it with K2, because D tells your gut to absorb calcium, and all the doctors know about K1. Okay, that's clotting, and they do the prothrombin times. That's for heart attack, strokes, that kind of thing. But K2 gets the calcium out of the blood. If you have high blood calcium for a long period of time, that's atherosclerosis risk. Okay, so you want to be able to get all these benefits of the D without the risk. So when you're taking the D3, take it with K2. And a few other things that not necessarily everyone knows.
Doesn't that drive you insane? I've talked about this before. The VA literally will prescribe you. They'll say, oh, we'll prescribe you vitamin D. And I'm like, I don't want your vitamin D. It's literally straight up vitamin D. There's no K. It drives me insane. I mean, honestly, Dr. Mercola's website, this actually drives me insane as well. His website actually has DK2 at 10,000, but I don't want to give my child 10,000. I just want to give them 5,000. There's no combination for anything less than 10,000 with K2. And it's annoying. It's like, you're like one of the best doctors in the world. Why don't you combine those two?
When I did that stuff for my daughter with her RLS, I had these capsules, and I end up, and I'll be honest too, when I came up with the idea, I talked to my aunt, who is at the time was a critical care intensive care unit nurse. And she has RLS. My grandfather had RLS. And I said, I feel like this is like probably a genetic recessive gene that's in our family. And because it can cause, increased risk of MS, RA, and these other issues, that there's more than one issue, a deficiency, right? There's more than one. And so that's the hard part. The part that would be good is if I can find a fix, most likely it would apply to you as well, because it's the genetic, right? And she was like, that makes a lot of sense. That's why you're only doing it when you're resting, because your circulation belt is resting and your cells would be more deficient, and your body doesn't want to be deficient in anything.
Yeah.
Right? So, and within 6 months of me talking to her about that, they published that information about iron and RLS and some people having that, which we knew it wasn't an issue for her, and I didn't think it was an issue for my daughter. And so I went on, and I ended up finding something didn't have iron in it, but like you were talking about, it's made for adults. Okay, and you can have up to I've never taken more than like 6 or 7 in a day. Okay, but there's little, and you don't want to overdose, right? That's bad too. So I actually took half a capsule. Well, it wasn't even like break a pill in half; it was a capsule. So it's powder. So what I had to do is I put it in raspberry jam. And I had her eat it every morning. And again, within 3 days, we were actually moving to come back up here to Michigan. We were out of state for a number of years. And one of my folks was there, and they were snuggling her. And they, was my mother, who actually, when they were growing up in their farmhouse, she was in the same bed as my aunt. And she knew everything about RLS, because that was the aunt that had the kicking. Okay. And she knew my daughter had this for quite some time. And she went down, and she was snuggling. And she's like, what did you do? And I was like, what? She's like, she didn't kick me, not once. like, she's not. And I said, I told you, I gave her that stuff.
3 days?
3 days. Now, here's the thing, a half a pill, right? Because I was scared. I didn't want to give her too much. And I
Right.
told her she's getting hypoglycemic. So she was kicking all night long until she had no energy, and then she had no sugar, right? She's waking up feeling like she's going to vomit and shaking. And so I tell her, lay down. I give her a little bit of honey and peanut butter.
Yeah.
And then within 5 minutes, I feel just fine, Mom. Right? And so, but within 2 weeks, she got hypoglycemic again. So then I gave her a full pill.
Yeah.
Okay. And did that. Went away. 2 months, nothing. So then then she had it again after 2 months. So then I gave her a pill and a half, gone for 2 more months. And then we had to give her 2. And then she never got hypoglycemic again. And she was in the 2nd percentile for height, and she was within 15th percentile for height in less than a year.
Yeah, and this just shows that you have to be in charge of your own body and even your children. You know what's best. And so if something's telling you, you don't have to have degrees. You don't. I mean, it's great that you do have a medical background, but in general, if you're curious and if you're paying attention and if you're using common sense and you're keeping track, I think that's a big deal that you said something earlier about you need to keep track of it. You need to know the numbers. You can typically figure out if something's not working or if something's working. So I love that you just said that.
I think what would be really best is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Linus Pauling Institute?
No.
And they're on the West Coast of the United States, and they do amazing work. They research, right?
Mm.
So the same way we research, pharmaceutical medication, they're researching curcumin or
What is it
cinnamon.
called?
Linus Pauling Institute.
Linus.
Linus, Linus.
US.
Pauling Institute. And they do amazing work. And what I would really like is if, like we do for the veterinarians in the United States that are required to have nutrition classes, that we would require that for our doctors.
Right. You would think.
And, but if, you make money off sick people, not healthy people, right?
Correct.
The veterinarians make money off healthy animals.
Right.
Not sick animals.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
That is the difference. And so I feel like, there's a lot of doctors who don't beat them up just because they were never taught.
Right. They weren't taught. Yeah. And we say that a lot. We say that a lot.
There's a lot of doctors who would like to do a lot of things, but the insurance companies, and here's something too, I don't want to get too political, but the big waste in government is a privatization. And they're only trying to privatize more, which makes a lot of money for ultra rich people. It doesn't fix problems. So here's one. If we were to go from a for-profit health insurance companies to nonprofit healthcare insurance companies, you would actually get better care for less money. Okay, and that's one of many different things we could be doing different. And it's not the federal employees, it's the privatization sector where there's a ton of waste. And when you can do something where people would get much better care for a lot less money, the only reason we're not doing that is because a bunch of ultra-rich people are making more money.
Well, because of money. Yeah, exactly.
And so, but if we did that, we could, and we have nonprofit companies. So if there was an upswelling of, demanding.
We wanted to start a nonprofit.
Right? The VA right now is looking at, United Healthcare, that's a for-profit. Why are we not having them look at the nonprofits that are working?
And the VA is?
They're looking, and so.
Wow.
But my point though is that they again are looking at a for-profit, and what I'm saying is they could quite easily do a nonprofit.
Yeah.
And reduce the cost, which is what they say they're wanting. But they're not doing that,
Yeah.
and get better healthcare. And so I'm just saying, if we had a few different changes, right, and we actually looked at nutrition, something that Japan does that I think is really amazing. They go through and they have their children, even in elementary school, be part of making their school lunches, and they do vegetables and different things, and they are much more likely to eat them when they participated in making them.
Sure. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
So these are things, we can do these things. Right. And
but again, we're very profit driven here and big pharma rules. I have a question for you. So when you go to your general practitioner, I know I don't go to just a regular, I pay out of pocket. It's not covered, but I go to functional medicine doctor. Do you do that in Michigan, or do you just go to a straight up insurance covers MD?
So I had a guy, and he was in Lansing that we would go to. We're like an hour and a half from there. Okay.
Oh, wow.
And so because there's a few things I wanted done, right? And our doctor wouldn't do them.
Right.
And so like one of the things I wanted to look at was antifungals for my Crohn's.
Uh-huh.
And because a number of my symptoms, right? And that's really, if you really want to help yourself and your doctor, get a symptom log and go,
Yeah.
at this time, what did you eat? Is there
Yep.
anything really abnormal?
Right.
Highly stressed, didn't get sleep. Those would be two big things, okay? Write that down and have a symptom journal log.
Absolutely.
That will help you help yourself, right? It'll help your doctor help you.
Mhm.
And so, what I found was sugar was one of my triggers. So with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's, which initially I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, that's just the colon. The Crohn's is from, the whole way up through your mouth. Okay. And so I actually had a perforation in my bowel a couple years ago. And I actually had mouth sores and a bunch of things, and it was not good. But I went through, and initially I looked at some of the symptoms, like when I would get really bad, I would have problems breathing. And I knew I was allergic to fungals. Okay. And that could be an allergic response. Okay. So if I was having a fungal overload, okay, and sugar feeds fungals, and sugar is one of my trigger foods, right? That's a big thing. So I went to my functional medicine guy, and it was out of pocket, like you said.
Yeah.
And I said, here's the thing. I know you can't tell me this is correct. I know you can't. I said, but antifungals are antifungals. It's not, could I try? I don't know the prescription you would give me. And I said, there was a couple, one of them was fluconazole. I looked up, and there's a couple others. Here's 3. I'm not asking for pain meds. Could I just have a trial dose for 1 month?
Fluconazole?
Yes. And I said, just so 1 month.
I did that for a while. That actually really, really helps.
Oh.
Nystatin wasn't real great on my stomach, the liquid nystatin, but fluconazole, forget it. I mean, I would take that for like.
Well, here's the thing is, so my husband, after 2 months, he said, I even smelled different. Better. Right. And I didn't have any issues for those couple months. The issue came into when I started looking at, he had me on like 1 a day, and fluconazole is, it's not a viral. Viral and fungals are very different things. Okay. And antiviral is a more low toxic kind of drug. Antifungals, the man-made stuff, is very hard on your liver. And so I could not stay at that level, and I had to come off. Okay. But it was funny because I've had a couple episodes since then. And one time I had to go into the doctor, not this last one, but one before that. And I was trying to tell the nurse, because I came in and my blood sugar's through the, because when I'm bad, I can't have sugars. And so and my blood sugar was nothing, right? It was in the basement. And so of course they want to give you sugar. And I told the lady, they came in and said, well, we're going to give you some fructose. And I thought one of those little like KFC honey packets, right? No, she came in brandishing this huge like syringe of sugar, basically. Okay. Wow. And I was like, oh my God, you can't do that. You do that. Probably I won't die, but like it'll be really bad. And she said they'd already had the IV in, because of course I had actually went in because I couldn't drink. Okay, for like 5 days, I hadn't been able to, like, I tried to drink something.
You could do a whole episode about Crohn's.
but I went in and
you have a lot of friends with Crohn's as well. So,
but they went through and they gave it to me, and I ended up reacting. Like, and she pulled it out and flushed the line, and I've never seen anyone react like that to even penicillin reaction. And I said, I'm trying to tell you, but my point is fluconazole is something, and for some people, when you're looking at your MS. And you get this virus test. If it is negative, like I said in the paper, I have a couple other things I'd want to rule those out as well. But if it is positive, which it is the leading cause, I would assume this is going to be an issue for quite a few people. And there's a number of things like sugar, right? Sugar isn't just for fungals.
We talk about it all the time.
Yep, a lot of bad bacteria. And when my husband was first diagnosed with MS, they had said in the National MS Society, RRMS, 25% of symptoms were inflammation related. So that was what I initially did for him. And what I did is I took out the sugar, I took out the gluten, and we took out the dairy. And we did that for a year. And I, at the same time, added the D3. I didn't at that time know about K2. D3, and I added the B12 and a few other fish oils, right, and these other things. And in 7 weeks, he lost 15 pounds, The black circles under his eyes went away. He was doing a mile an hour faster for a mile longer. And instead of having a relapse every 3 months, he went 4.5 years till his next relapse. And that was when we left the state and he changed jobs and was highly stressed. But the foot drop was so dramatically different in that period of time.
Wow.
After he would exercise, I mean, dramatically, like when he would exercise before that 7 weeks, like every second or third foot drop, or footstep, he would foot drop.
Wow.
And after, it'd be once the whole night. And I'd be watching. And I was like, holy crap, in 7 weeks. And then he went again the 4.5 years with no relapses. And he'd been relapsing every 3 months, that first 10.5 months after he was diagnosed.
Wow.
And that was just through the diet and it wasn't like didn't think I was going to eliminate it, but we could reduce symptoms. And so with this EBV, go with it with that idea. And you can, if you reduce the sugar, make sure you don't have a high ferritin level, right? That you're not contributing to that. Because if you are, you can have your blood taken, right? And reduce that high iron level that's constantly out there that would be feeding a viral.
Right.
Make it very hard to clear it.
Yes.
And part of this too, understand your nutrients have, it's biochemical reactions, right? So you don't want to take iron with calcium because they bind together, right? But iron with your B vitamins and C vitamins actually makes it work better.
Is this all in your papers that you have online?
Well, one of the things I have in there was that iron and zinc have a teeter-totter effect.
Okay.
So, you want to make sure you're not deficient in zinc. Make sure you're getting enough zinc. And I have that.
Which I'm always low in. Every time I test, it's like low in zinc.
So that is one thing.
Where can we find all of your information as far as like, because I believe your website, lessbarriers.com, I love how you wrote it on underneath your name. But underneath, is it resources, or I couldn't find it when you sent it.
So when you go on the first page, and you're going to see, we have a movable wheelchair tray, and I made it for my husband. Okay. Because nothing on the market helped him. Okay. That's what you'll see. But at the very top, there's the 3 little lines for the menu. When you click on that, there'll be catalog.
Okay.
Click the catalog. And then you'll see the tray again, and you'll scroll down and you'll say digital downloads.
Okay.
Okay. You click in there, and one of the things that's in there is MS.
Okay.
And what I highly suggest is this: print it. I think it's 2 full pages of references. Okay. Absolutely print that part and take it to your doctor. If your doctor has a portal where you can upload that to them so they can read that over prior to you coming in. And, in there I have, here's some of the medications. And some of the medications that have been found to be good for EBV aren't normally used for antivirals. A doctor will not just script that. I don't care if I was a doctor telling you this. They wouldn't do that because it's a license and they can't script something that the FDA has not cleared unless there is research stating, and for this, they actually have, quote unquote, the mechanism of action, the MOA, that gold standard that doctors like. They actually have that in there. Okay.
Oh, wow.
So if they have that, there is a special script that they can actually give you to get those things for that. And so I talk about that in the paper too. Like, here's this, and this is how you can ask for it. And if you would do it with these other things, right, it gives you the better chance of clearing it if this is your problem. And again, if not, I have right before a couple other things you might want to, if this is negative, look at that too. I would want to rule that out as well. But for my husband, he was positive for both these things. So
that's amazing. Well, if you're in North Carolina, physiciansforfreedom.com, you can click on that, and people have their providers that started their own businesses. Like you were saying, there should be more nonprofits. So these doctors started their own thing during COVID because basically they were fired. They were told they had to do certain things. So if you go on their.com, there's clinics that will actually, you can speak freely about stuff like this. And most of them do like video conferences as well. So you can look into that.
But this gives your doctors those references. While it may mean nothing to you, that is what the doctor goes. They take a big sigh of relief and go, "Oh, there's JAMBA, PubMed, Blood, Cell, Immunology. These are legitimate research institutions, and they're saying these things. And so now my license
will be covered." But what I'm saying is, if they don't have a doctor that's like, open to even, there's some providers that if you brought in your own paperwork from, a PubMed, they would roll their eyes, or, just be rude to you. So, I mean, read the room. If that's the case, then you have other opportunities, especially if you go in there and ask, I just want to rule out Epstein-Barr virus. Do you mind if, I get tested about oh, we don't do that here. So, if you run into stuff like that.
What I would suggest with that, is, first off, make sure the doctor understands it's not .com. So you say, well, this has references. They're medical journal references. This is PubMed. Okay. Because some doctors will roll their eyes at the .com. This person is trying to sell you a supplement. And so they're telling you something, but it's not backed up in research. This is backed up in research, and we're asking for you to get tested is really what we're asking for. So when they say, I would start it off with, here's the research. And in that references, that's one of the ones that's in red, which I highlighted it. This is the leading cause of MS, right? And when they're saying, oh, this is coming from this annal or this medical journal, oh, okay. And as a patient, you have a right to look at what research is saying might be causing your disease. And when this is saying it's the leading cause, then I would like to at least rule out what medical research is saying could possibly be my leading cause. That's how I would say that, because it is their license. And how much does an antiviral test cost? I mean, like a virus test cost.
What if they come and say, what if they say that, oh, this isn't my, do you want a referral to neurology? What would you say?
I would say try to get to a different general practitioner. And I say that because, first off, if you have any viral issue, I don't care if it's COVID or you're not going to go to a neurologist. That's first off. Okay. They have not proven verifiably that 100% of MS is caused by this, right? And neurologists are, they are the master of the neurological domain. And that I would go to a different general practitioner is what I would ask and say, do you have another general practitioner or an infectious disease doctor who deals with viruses? And I feel like if you did that, there would be more of a naturopathic doctor.
Ooh, I like that. I like the infectious disease. Yeah.
Right. And they would do that. Right. And you say, but start it with, I've read this PubMed research, or, the journal in there that I have, the medical journal, and say, there's this medical journal and it says the leading cause of MS is EBV. I have MS. I would like to rule out, this EBV is being part of my issue. That is a good way to approach that. And then if it is negative, okay, great. You have peace of mind. If it is positive, really ask for the quantification and say, and doctors understand this, I want a baseline. I want a baseline to understand if we try anything, what's being effective and what isn't.
I love that.
And they understand that too. And that's something, if you can kind of, talk their jargon, right, you're more likely to get what you
positive result. Yes. I love that. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge. I mean, I'm sure you're full of so much more when it comes to Crohn's as well, because I feel like you're in two different worlds, right? You're in you taking care of your own body, and then you taking care and figuring out the MS for your husband. He's very blessed to have you. I'm sure he would say that every day. And if he doesn't, he needs to say that. He's very, very blessed to have you in his life. And
I think I'll say one last thing though. Because every marriage has ups and downs, and obviously us both having issues, it's, there's
hard,
it's hard. But definitely, whether you're talking MS or Crohn's, mental health, go to a counselor, talk to somebody. It's, you need some kind of support, right? And so I would highly suggest that, because I also think, there's a lot of research, even with Crohn's, about mental health and stress. And if you can try to reduce that in different ways, whether that's, calming music, or, and again, you talk about previous traumas and get that out of your system, so that it's not re-injuring you, that can be very beneficial for, again, I think really all autoimmune diseases really, when you are highly stressed, that and sugar both really affect your immune system. And because like I said before, I feel like it's a pie, right? And this part is maybe what you're eating, and this part is the stress you're having, and this part, right? And the more of these pieces of the pie you tackle, the better your health outcome, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of how I feel about that. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Allaire, and lessbarriers.com. I love that you have your own. Is this a nonprofit that you started?
No, we just created the trait. My husband, he had a walker, obviously it's degenerative, and he was getting his own food and doing all that. And then he went to a wheelchair, and we got the tray, right? Like, you get these wheelchairs, and he'd go up to a refrigerator. He'd actually have to take it off to go get food in the refrigerator or get something out of the microwave. And then I would set him up with everything he'd be eating, watching TV. Hope, you got to go, and you got to go right now. And so he'd backtrack, take everything off, put it on a table, get the tray off, then get to the restroom. And by that time, I might have another problem. Right. At that point, we threw it out. And so after 2 years, I developed a movable wheelchair tray, and it's for desktop length arm wheelchairs. So if you have like the Invicares or the Drive Cruise 3-4s, which is what Medicare, Medicaid pays for, and the Invicares are what a lot of VA people have, or veterans. But yeah, it took us. We did plastic injection molding. That's something we took money out, and we actually created this movable wheelchair tray so that, and he uses it all the time.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, so hopefully we've talked to a bunch of OTs and PTs that thought was really very cool and
amazing. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show links as well. So people that do get around in a wheelchair, they have knowledge that this is out there, and hopefully they'll reach out to you. And how can we reach you?
So that lessbarriers.com.
Okay.
And again, if you're looking for the tray's on the initial page. But if you want any of these other things, you can go to the very top. There's 3 little lines for the menu. Click on that. There's catalog. Catalog has information on first the tray, yes, but then there's digital products. Click digital products, and that'll take you to one of the things I have is MS, but one's women's health, one's men's health. I have several others that I want to do here. I want to do one on brain health because I found some really interesting information about like regrowing nerves and myelin.
Yeah, cool.
And doing some other stuff that was very cool. That I was like,
yeah,
hey, that would do that because
if you can do it, girl. You have the knowledge. You need to do that.
If you can reduce what's damaging the brain, then do something like stem cell or do some of these other things that are improving it. The issue is until you can reduce what's damaging it, even if you get the stem cells, like you know what I'm talking about out of state here. That stuff, within a few years, it's all gonna be damaged again.
Right.
You got to reduce the damage and then go after that.
Some friends that have spent the 20,000, they're good for a couple years and then not. So you should absolutely study that and then provide that info to us.
So
we need people like you. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for coming on the show, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.
You too. Take care.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.